Badlands, right into Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everyone watching this week's episode of Breaking History. Gordon, how you doing today?
Hey, man, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm okay. I've got my coffee going, and I'm ready to tackle some big topics. I know we only have about an hour today, so we're going to have to go through a lot pretty efficiently. I guess what we'll do first, like usual, is we'll have a word from today's primary sponsor, and then we'll jump into the thick of things.
Sounds good.
Goldco is our sponsor for today. The last 4 years have put so much stress on American family finances. Help end the stress now and celebrate the golden age with President Trump by diversifying with gold and silver. Remember President Trump's first term? Gold increased by 55%. Don't wait. Diversify your hard-earned assets and buy your gold from Goldco now with no minimum purchase. Goldco has been established as a top-rated precious metals company and a leader in the gold industry, providing white glove treatment for over 10 years. Their buyback guarantee assures you that if your situation changes, they will repurchase your metals at the best price, providing you with the peace of mind. You may even qualify for up to 10% back in bonus silver. Visit badlandsgold.com to claim your free information and instantsilver.com/badlands to see how much free silver you can get. Find out the relationship between gold, silver, Trump, and you with the free report focused on Trump and your financial future. That's badlandsgold.com and instantsilver.com/badlands to take control of your financial destiny. Whew. Okay, cool. So I know today we have a few poignant items that we want to unpack. There's going to be some thoughts on the crackdown on drug cartels and also high-level banking operations that have been laundering drug money, terrorist financing that I'd like to share some ironies of that have been underway, especially in Canada. A lot of this has, I think, something to do also with the tariffs and the threat to effectively cripple the Canadian economy, which has been an interesting little drama that I've enjoyed a little bit. The other aspect will have to do with the crackdown of USAID and the CIA. Some thoughts there I'd like to throw at you and some questions, and especially what I think would be a good thing to lead off on is the thing that's probably on a lot of people's minds. You are one of the most reliable, proficient, educated Middle East experts that is in my sphere of influence that I really appreciate. So whenever I see certain anomalies that I find difficult piecing together within my broader hypothesis about how the world's going, I like throwing it at you. And even if I don't fully agree necessarily, I know that you always tend to have a very reasonable, logical, consistent mode of formulating your hypotheses that I appreciate very much. So the first thing I'm going to toss at you, Gordon, I'm going to play a 1-minute clip of something most people by now, I think, probably saw as the press conference of Benjamin Netanyahu and Trump. So an hour and 4 minutes on one of the scenarios that is being pushed right now regarding the Gaza. So I'm going to play that, and then I'm going to ask you some questions.
The only reason the Palestinians want to go back to Gaza is they have no alternative. It's right now a demolition site. This is just a demolition site. Virtually every building is down. They're living under fallen concrete that's very dangerous and very precarious. They instead can occupy all of a beautiful area with homes and safety, and they can live out their lives in peace and harmony instead of having to go back and do it again. The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area. Do a real job, do something different. Just can't go back. If you go back, it's going to end up the same way it has for 100 years.
Okay, there's obviously more to it. It's much, much broader, but that was, I think, the thing that has been freaking out a lot of people. It doesn't. I don't like it. I don't like the sound of it. But at the same time, you and I, we've been struggling to make sense of how do you cut through these Gordian knots for over nearly 2 years now, or a year, I don't know, 18, 19 months. And it's not easy. So this definitely is coming at a left field. It may be the right thing to do. Is it talk? Is it banter? Is it psyop? Is there a good way to look at this thing that doesn't look like ethnic cleansing? What's your take on this, Gordon?
Yeah, well, first, you're absolutely right. I mean, on its surface level, it's a concerning narrative deployment that we got yesterday. Now, to be clear, when I was on Badlands Daily yesterday morning, CanCon asked me, what do you expect to come out of this thing tonight? And I said, if it is a big deal, it might be, we might get like a big development. I expect the optics to be a capitulation by Trump to the Zionist regime. That's what I expect to happen, because that's in alignment with the patterns that I've been seeing emerge. And the pattern is to see basically working towards peace, because I think Trump's priority is to bring things to a halt in terms of the violence everywhere, not just in Gaza or in the Middle East, but Ukraine, everywhere else. And so that requires basically capitulating everything that the radicals in Tel Aviv are demanding, and giving them, or taking away rather, all their excuses for why they would continue the war. And that's what we've seen a lot of these. And to be fair, Smotrich, who last week was threatening to resign from the government, has now withdrawn that threat. I'm getting a little bit of an echo. Hopefully that's not coming through.
I can maybe mute myself.
It just started, so hopefully it'll go away. But Smotrich has now withdrawn that threat. So for the time being, Netanyahu is safe in terms of being prime minister. That also is a signal to me that whatever Trump said to them worked, that they're not flying off now. Because Smotrich, remember, was saying, restart the war right now, forget this ceasefire deal, or I'm resigning and the government collapses. And so Netanyahu was between a rock and a hard place there. We'll see what happens with that. But point is that whatever Trump said to these people seemed to have worked, because Smotrich has stood down. On its surface, this is, like you said, ethnic cleansing. It's absolutely what it would be. The textbook definition of it. You're forcibly removing people from their land against their will. I don't think people have really stopped to think about what that would look like on a like implementing it. Like, how do you actually go in there and get people to leave? And what it would require is, it required a military operation, I would imagine. I mean, to get people to force to leave their house, you have to threaten them with violence if they don't want to leave, right? I mean, that's the only way to do it. So unless you figure out a way to shift to invert the incentive structure, but I just don't see that happening given the history of this situation. With all that said, I would start by saying that I don't think what people believe is going to happen based on what happened yesterday, last night, I don't think that's actually what's going to happen, and we can get into that. I think Trump is actually playing a long game. I've talked about the feigns that he's done before. Here, I'll play a quick video that has made the rounds on X, and this is pretty interesting. Mm-hmm. I certainly don't discount something like this, but I can't take credit for being the genesis of it.
U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area.
So I'll let it keep playing and just silence it. So the prevailing opinion that a lot of people are noticing is like, there seems to be something about Netanyahu's body language when Trump says we are going to take it over, the U.S. is going to take it over, where he seems to be hearing some information for the first time. It's almost like he didn't know all the details that Trump is conveying. It's almost like Trump maybe didn't run all this by him. So that's really interesting. You also have a story out today from Barak Ravid. Barak Ravid, former Israeli intelligence turned journalist, and he is Trump's go-to guy for all of his narrative deployments in Israel. And his story today kind of like rehashes a lot of the kind conflict between Trump and Netanyahu over the years. And he has a quote from a source in the Trump White House, and who knows if that's what that means or whether it's real, but it says a lot of time has passed and their relations have improved, but Trump still does not like Bibi, does not trust Bibi. And that aligns with everything that I have witnessed Trump say about Netanyahu. A lot of the stuff he said about Netanyahu has not made it into the cultural zeitgeist. So it's a lot of like under the radar kind of stuff. But if you piece it all together, it certainly presents that narrative to me, that Trump, and that's before you even play that video that I made of him like disrespecting Netanyahu during his first visit to Israel. Before you even get there, you just play the stuff that he says. I don't trust Netanyahu because Netanyahu backed out at the last minute with the Soleimani strike. And then he tried to come in and take credit for it. That's weird. Like that didn't rub me the right way. His exact words. That didn't rub me the right way. I didn't like that. Yeah. So like those kind of comments. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if Trump did pull a fast one on Netanyahu and didn't tell him that, hey, I'm going to go out there and announce that the U.S., not Israel, but the U.S. is taking control of Gaza. So if that's true, then that kind of plays into my theory that there's more to this. Nothing is as it seems, and there's more to it. Then we need to get more information before we get too wrapped up in the specifics. With that said, I went on Badlands Daily earlier, and we had a short debate about this, and basically the debate kind of centered on whether or not us doing this, like if we take Trump at his word and we take control of Gaza, take ownership stake, whatever that means, and redevelop it as part of a real estate deal, and basically displace the Palestinians. Maybe some of them are allowed to come back. But the point is that other people from around the world would be brought in. That was the argument that was presented to me. And, I was trying to convey to everyone, and I'll convey it here again, that first principles, that's something we talk about at GART, something we talk about a lot on Badlands, is maintaining this moral consistency when you look at things. So what we're describing here, you and I agree, is called ethnic cleansing. Before you even get there, if you think about the idea of taking land away from people by force, that's theft. It's also, if you're taking land away from people by force who don't want to leave, and then you're developing something on it, and then you're bringing other people there to either live, work, economically benefit from it, and then you are extracting wealth. That was the thing that really excited CanCon and Ash, was the potential to get an ROI, is the word they used, on like an investment there, implying that we would invest U.S. Treasury funds or sovereign wealth fund or whatever into this, and then we would get money back. A lot of different things to say about that, but I would say that the first is that kind of follows the model of imperialism. It follows the model of the unipolar world order. It follows the model of the way that we used to do things before. The model of George Bush, the model of Barack Obama, the model of Hillary Clinton. That's how they have engaged with the world, and the people that they learned from, their mentors, engaged with the world, which was take what you can, extract wealth from the land. The people who live there be damned, right? They either get along with us or they get displaced. They get sent off to live elsewhere. So there's obviously an issue there. I would also argue that if you were able to rectify those issues, the idea of sending money, like Monday, we got this amazing news that we were shutting down the USAID program, the Agency for International Development, which Ron Paul put out a video where he explained that this is purely a regime change operation. That's all it's for. It's basically everything we talk about with Operation Gladio that Colonel Tanner Watkins talks about. That's basically done through the USAID. Mike Benz has been posting about this for a very long time, about the censorship apparatus. And he pointed out, he said, the comment he made was, if the job is too dirty for the CIA, you give it to USAID. And then there's pictures circulating of jihadists in USAID tents, posing with their RPGs, doing propaganda videos in USAID tents. People have dug in and found receipts where tens of millions of dollars, I think one of them was $63 million, being sent to a group in northwestern Afghanistan or northwestern Syria, which is obviously either Al-Qaeda or ISIS or an affiliate. So shutting that down on Monday was a big deal. People were celebrating of it. I was on Badlands Daily yesterday. We were talking about it. CanCon and I were talking about it. So the idea, like after that we're not gonna send millions of dollars, our treasure, we're not gonna export it around the world anymore. And then literally the same day, everyone gets whipped up in the psyop that, oh well, but hey, we are gonna send money to Gaza to rebuild Gaza because it's an investment and we'll get money back out of it. Well, wait a minute. I thought the whole idea of America First and MAGA was to take that money and invest it back in America and rebuild the homeland. Like I thought that we were done with like nation building, right? So there's just a lot of like, I think this is a very emotional issue. I think people get wrapped up in the emotion, but even people who aren't emotionally invested in it, who are just observing it, in a more objective standpoint, I think still are kind of getting swept up in the glitz and glam of like a real estate development. We're going to turn it into a tourist destination, and that means that there's going to no longer be conflict there, and there's no longer going to be strife or tension or any of that stuff, and kind of ignoring some of the the logistics of how do you get there, right? I mean, the old saying is that amateurs talk strategy, professionals talk logistics. So strategy is, turn Gaza into a tourist destination, like the Middle East Riviera is the word that's being used. Professionals would say, okay, well, how do you achieve that? Like, what is the step-by-step how you get there?
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that's a good set of considerations for sure. And like part of me is thinking to myself, well, if the U.S. does exercise serious force and influence to try to intervene into that situation, which may be what is required at the end of the day. I don't know how many large power nations with that type of relationship with Israel could possibly do that. The question would be in my mind, like, what are you doing it for? Is it like a temporary protectorate in the sense of like trying to, literally clean up the demolition, dismantle some of the Muslim Brotherhood operations, and provide actual long-term, like real nation building, not the George Bush, Dick Cheney type of nation building, which really did damage to the very word. Like, who doesn't like nation building? Everybody likes nation building. Food, water, infrastructure corridors, build up an economy, help them stand on their own 2 feet, and then move away. Like, don't give a man a fish, teach him to fish. And that's fine. And we just somehow along the way tolerated the change of that definition into bombing a country back to the Stone Age to install Western-run puppets that will privatize whatever target country we want to blow up in service to the major cartels that are running the Bilderberger Group and the military-industrial complex and whatever. So if we can restore some dignity to the term and actually get in there with building high quality cities again with modern infrastructure, and maybe, we will get perhaps obviously investments out of that and some payback, but we don't own it. We don't try to, like Trump is throwing around certain language, we're going to own it. No. So if you don't do that, you're just literally going in to solve the problem, to create a more stable situation, as a temporary protectorate. Maybe that involves people temporarily housed, some of them outside of Gaza, in order to be brought back in to live in their historic homeland. That would be, in my mind, cool. My concern would be the wrong way to do it, or the wrong reasons to do it, might be, well, I mean, people who have watched our show enough probably are aware that we've talked about the Crusades a lot, and the satanic, like fake Christian orders that were masquerading as Christian, but only to create these forever conflicts, like the Knights Templar and the Teutonic Knights later on. And the Knights Hospitaller was sort of the right hand to the left hand path of the Templars, that were, again, these very, very satanic orders with an esoteric inner structure and an exoteric, seemingly Christian outer structure for the non-initiated. And the continuity of these things throughout the last 1,000 years bothers me. And, like
for the Jesuits being another one.
The Jesuits were an incarnation, for those who might have missed our shows on that. And I don't know if we ever did that promised deep dive into the Jesuits. I don't know if we did, actually.
I think we did like a part 1, but we probably need to do a part 2. I'm pretty sure. I think we did one because Cynthia came on and talked to us about it.
Yeah. Okay, right. Yeah, we should probably penetrate even further into that. But yeah, just to recapitulate, like the Jesuits were themselves seated as an outgrowth of the Templars. And even Albert Pike talked about how the Jesuits were just a more sophisticated iteration of the Templars that seemed to have been created at the same time by the same agencies that created the Anglican Church in 1534, just 4 years after the Knights of Malta were rebranded in Malta as their new headquarters in 1530. So you had these three sort of orders, and I think the Jesuits and the Anglicans. I'm in Canada, and our entire history is shaped by Jesuit Anglican psyops that have been manipulating our natives, giving them false sacred stories, erasing their old stories and giving them new repackaged stories that are then used to control a lot of the natives in the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries to use as weaponized groups against settlers. And at the same time, they were also influencing settlers by penetrating with so many Jesuit penetrations of churches that would then create a weaponization of white people to go out and do revanchism and go and kill communities of natives at the same time. So to get this type of Palestine versus Jewish eye for an eye revanchism that also did a number on the Christians of Europe, right? Yep. Protestants were killing Catholics for centuries. That was, people say, oh yeah, ethno-nationalism is making a comeback right now. People say with this logic, it's having all of these different ethnicities, and I'm sure, immigration's been weaponized by Soros. Yes, that's true too. But people make this overly simplistic syllogism saying that, if we just had pure, Germany for the Germans, French for the France for the French, and every country had their national ethno-nationalist, same ethnicity, same, everyone was Christian, everyone had the same culture, we wouldn't have wars. And it's like, well, my friend Dave brought this irony up. He's like, well, most of Europe has been shaped by white people killing white people, calling themselves Christian.
Christians killing Christians. 50 million Protestants killed by the Vatican, mostly in the 16th century. So yes, that's 100% true. And the consistent theme that you'll find throughout all of that, really throughout human history, is, especially the past 1,000 years, is identity politics. That's how it's done. Tribalization. It's like you find the label, and then you make sure people identify those labels, and then you divide and conquer. And obviously, when you have things like physical characteristics where you can just look at someone and immediately assign them to one group or the other, it becomes inherent. It just becomes very easy to do. So skin color, just different traits, characteristics, whatever. Because remember, at one point it was Britons killing Britons, then it was Britons killing Scots, then it was English killing English, then English killing Scots, then British killing Irish, then British killing French. It becomes one thing, then the next thing, and then the tribes come together, and then they find a new identity to go after. And so like the labeling of tribes and the tribalism is how warmongering, I think, is driven. That's what fuels it all.
Absolutely.
Which is why we should always be we should have trepidation when people start talking about blanket identities and saying like, all right, well, this entire identity, like they did in 2016, black people, gay people, like the whole woke thing. MAGA, I think, responded to that. America responded to that pretty well. It took us a few years, I think, to really get our footing under it, but I think we're seeing that the pushback really in play now. But that's what it's all about. And so I would say that, we should talk about the geopolitical stuff, like the geopolitical.
Right. Absolutely. I just wanted to quickly say one thing, Not
saying pivot away. I'm saying as it relates to this, to the Gaza thing. Yes. So not pivoting off of that. I'm saying, but before I get there, I would point out that, there's been a goalpost moving exercise that's occurred here, because for the past year and a half, we've been told ad nauseum by the pro-Zionist lobby, by the pro-Zionist camp, that this situation in Gaza, this war in Gaza, was not about annexing Gaza. It was not about, removing Palestinians from Gaza. It was always about just going after Hamas, eliminating the security threat, which I think a lot of us knew was a bunch of BS. But here now, all of a sudden, it's like everyone's had their memory wiped, and now that this thing has been announced, because it came out of Trump's mouth and not Biden's mouth, everyone's like, oh, well, yeah, I mean, removing these people from Gaza, that makes all the sense in the world. And of course, we're going to annex Gaza. Like, of course, that was always the plan. And it's like, well, wait a minute, that doesn't, like, we just totally shifted the goalposts from where we were for the past year and a half. But let's talk about the geopolitical stuff, because what we talk about a lot on the show is the multipolar world. We talk about the sovereign alliance, like what we have deemed, or Burning Bright and others have deemed the sovereign alliance, and this emerging new order that, regardless of whether you believe in the more conspiratorial theories, there clearly is a new alliance that's emerged that Putin and Xi are very open about. The global South, as it's called, plus Russia, who's technically part of the global North, coming together to create a parallel system outside of the central banking unipolar Western hegemony. And from my own research, I've learned that 20 years ago, there was a similar effort that was employed by people like Assad, Gaddafi, Saddam Hussein, a number of others. Putin was not a part of it back then because he had just entered office and he was trying to restore relations with the West. So he was not part of that sovereign alliance, so to speak. But all of those people have now been deposed, murdered, removed from office. Every single one of them. Assad was the last one. He just fell back in December. So that was a failure. And the failure was that they didn't have the power projection to back up the kinetic military force to back up what they were trying to do. Now they do have that. You see China, Iran, Russia has formed this triumvirate, the same one that Zbigniew Brzezinski warned about in his book from the 90s. The one thing that could potentially stop the globalist New World Order has emerged. And so the impetus is now kind of on them, like Putin and Xi, because I think if this is allowed to happen the way that people think it's going to happen, not the way that I personally believe Trump is going to do it, you're going to see the world kind of look at Putin and Xi and say, wait a minute, you told us to come join you, to come join BRICS, to come join the SCO, to come kind of defect from the unipolar world order because we were going to come together and protect one another from this. And are you just going to stand by and let America once again, even though it's under Donald Trump, once again come in and remove 2.5 million people from their ancestral land? You're just going to let that happen? Doesn't matter how you personally feel, because I know a lot of people have personal feelings about this stuff. Regardless of how you personally feel about the Gaza-Israel situation, which side you're on, look at it from their perspective. Look at it from the outsider perspective, not the Palestinian perspective, the Chinese perspective, the Russian perspective, the Indian perspective, all these other groups, the North Korean perspective. They're like, well, wait a minute. If you're not going to stop this from happening, you're just going to let them do this. Why should we join you? Like, why shouldn't it just be every man for himself? Why should we join this multipolar world order, this regions of responsibility that you've been talking about for years? There's a lot of credibility on the line here for guys like Putin and Xi and all them, not to mention inside of the Middle East, the Arab leaders, MBS.
Yeah, on that issue, what do you think of MBS's response? Because so far he's been pretty in opposition. He said, no, this is a terrible idea. Do you think that that's a bit of play acting, and that there's definitely some coordination that I'm seeing between the Saudis and Trump currently on a variety of levels? So certainly coordination is happening and underway, but then there seems to be almost like the Saudis are as caught off guard as perhaps Benjamin Netanyahu was with this announcement, and they're in opposition to the outward messaging. Do you think that there's discussion and planning behind the scenes that somehow we may not know about? What's your take on that?
I do think there's coordination happening. But I also think that MBS is being earnest when he comes out and says this is a non-starter. This is non-negotiable. The statement he put out like an hour after the press conference last night was effectively, he didn't say act of war, but this is basically an act of war. He's saying this is a non-negotiable. There's no compromise here. We will have a two-state solution, or we will not have a normalization with Israel. We will not recognize Israel as a nation state if there is no two-state solution. Because all of a sudden, we're not talking about two-state solutions anymore. We're talking about, creating this new strip of land somewhere for the Palestinians and moving them somewhere else, Egypt or Jordan. And if we look at Egypt and Jordan, I mean, Colonel McGregor has been saying this for 6 months on Judge Napolitano's shows, talking about how both Sisi in Egypt and Abdullah in Jordan have been facing mass like unrest because their people are angry that they're standing by and doing nothing ostensibly, while their family, they're some of them family, because you have 2/3 of Jordan are Palestinian, are being slaughtered like right in front of them. And they're like, you're not going to do anything. You're not going to stand up to this. Like, you're not going to you're going to do the Kobayashi Maru and not engage. You're just going to sit back and let this unfold. And so they view them as puppets. And actually what McGregor had said months ago is he said he thinks that one of them is probably going to be violently removed from office, probably most likely Abdullah. So there are some real implications, and just understand this. If Jordan, if either one of those governments is overthrown violently by the people, that's one more destabilized nation. That's one more nation that falls into chaos, and that can easily become a domino effect. Like, that is a destabilizing event that could unfold, like could impact the entire region. So you don't want to see that happen. And then if you take 1.5 million or 1.25 million angry Gazans and you put them in each one of those countries, that's only going to make things even more tense and more insane, right? So there are a lot of reasons why I don't think this is going to happen the way that people have been fear-mongering about for the past 12 hours. And it has less to do with Donald Trump and what he said and more to do with just the geopolitical realities of what is occurring in the world and what is pragmatic.
That's good. No, I appreciate that. And again, just to make clear, because I just wanted to get my concern thing that it's on people's radar, is that the Order of Malta has been very influential. And one of the things, like every CIA director since John Dulles has been Order of Malta, every member of the SS Nazis that were brought into Gladio were all Knights of Malta. They're hugely influential. It's very disturbing. And, part of one of their ambitions is to recreate the Kingdom of Jerusalem, which we've talked about so many times. It's basically that pseudo-Christian kingdom that was part of the Crusades of the Forever Wars. And there is a strange, like, that was the flag, of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. And there is this weird stuff with Pete Hegseth and his, everyone's seen this, I'm sure, but his, certainly the choice of tattooing that thing on your chest indicates a bit of an unhinged mindset, since that the only other person that did that was King Edward VII when he went to Jerusalem to set up the Palestinian Expedition Fund in 1862. That was part of the Quattro Coronati Freemasonic launch of Charles Warren and others that created the state of Zionism, that wanted to reconstruct Solomon's Temple, that started the excavations there. That's the guy who did that. And the only guy before that was King Richard of Lionheart, who was part of the Third Crusade. And then you got, Don Jr. seems to get confused by this too. Like, he's got some weird choices for designing his guns with the Templar cross or the Kingdom of Jerusalem cross as well, which is annoying. I think he's a good guy, but I think that there's some weird confusion that's being infused into the culture surrounding some elements of MAGA that I think is untrustworthy. And if there's anybody that wants to actually rebuild the Kingdom of Jerusalem, then I think they're playing into a very, very dangerous game that's trying to invoke ritualistically the coming of the Antichrist, which is what Charles Warren directly was a part of doing and wrote about that with Aleister Crowley and others. That's part of the... So that's a concern I have, just throwing that out there into the radar. I don't want that.
And sadly, there are elements of, the Christians who view that as happening. They think that this is going to be like a second coming kind of moment. The Jewish element in Israel sees this as their Messiah coming, and I think the Christian Zionist element sees it as the second coming of Christ, and this is like the path is being laid. And it's the reason that stuff is dangerous is because there's a playbook. There's a playbook that of the prophecies where it becomes very easy for people with resources, power, influence, clout to orchestrate that playbook, orchestrate those events to mislead people to believe that. So, a lot of people get angry and send me messages that I can't see the light here because I'm dismissing the prophecies and I'm dismissing, biblical dispensationalism. And the reality is it would be foolish for us to operate from a certainty that is what's happening. Because if you're wrong, what are the implications if you're wrong? If you're wrong, can you live with yourself if you're wrong? Because if you're wrong, you could potentially be serving Satan and serving the other side, who is actually working to do something very sinister. I mean, the price of me being wrong, it's like, okay, well then, the second coming of Christ and everything's good and gravy, right? It's like, I'll ask for forgiveness and hopefully be granted it. But it's like if y'all are wrong, it could, like, the implications could be way worse than if I'm wrong. So
Yeah.
I'm much more comfortable being on this side of, like, being skeptical and being open to any possibility at this point. But so
No, well said, man. Yeah, absolutely. Like, we got to be aware, like, it is geopolitically expedient if you have ideology, like if you're a satanic figure with a lot of resources and power geopolitically to make things happen, then you could see how useful it would be geopolitically to have people pining for the end times, which will result in a lot of people disactivating their creative problem solving qualities of doing something about the fire, because you're like, oh, but God wants the fire. I would be doing something anti-holy if I tried to put out the fire. And it's like, but people are dying. Do something. The water is right there.
It's
and they're
God's
like, no,
will. It's God's will. It's God's will. It's like
very geopolitically useful. I hear you. Just do good.
Yeah,
and if the fire is ordained to do the damage, you will have done everything you could to stop it, because you care about human life that much. And, don't just sit back or even, God forbid, put gasoline on the fire, as some more radicalized groupings of the Christian Zionist figures around Dick Cheney have found themselves doing, of saying, well, I'll be an instrument of Armageddon because that's God's will. So I'll put gasoline on the fire to accelerate the coming of the Messiah. Or would, some of the Jabotinskyites also seem to be drinking from that Kool-Aid. Which is
Well, and the other half of that is the more secular version, which is, trusting Trump and trusting that there's a plan and trusting that he's got this. And he certainly has demonstrated his competence and his ability to operate in this very complex geopolitical battle space. So yeah, there's a lot to be said about that. I mean, I certainly do trust that he is working in earnest and doing things in a way that are going to deliver measurable, net positive results. But I also think that part of this whole awakening transcendence moment, where we are, in my opinion, transcending to a new epoch in human civilization. Trump calls it the golden age. I think that's all very accurate. Part of that is regaining our self-governance, our sovereignty, and that means questioning everything. It means asking difficult questions. It means talking things out, not just sitting back and saying, well, this guy who we have come to know and love, he's in charge, and so he's got it. There's no reason for us to even participate. I think that is a betrayal of what this whole thing is supposed to be, which is the process of us training ourselves, conditioning ourselves for self-governance in the future once Trump is gone, because he's not going to be around forever.
Yeah. Amen. Absolutely, dude. That's absolutely it. So look, I think we've painted a fairly decent, concise picture of some of the elements that are on the game board geopolitically, and especially, the issues with the Middle East we're going to find out more in the coming days ahead of the contour, the details of what this is going to look like. I don't know if we're going to get any resolution anytime soon, but certainly we can't necessarily trust words, as I think people have realized if they're watching this show. They have to look to deeper processes behind the words. Mm-hmm. It's 12:41, so we have a little bit of time. I don't know if a pivot towards some of the money laundering stuff would be appropriate now, or are there any other considerations you wanted to get out of the way before we do this?
Yeah. No. I think that's about it. I mean, this is something that's going to be, like you said, playing out. We're only at the beginning of this. I think we're going to get more information. There's actually a press conference, I think, at 1. So it sounds like maybe we'll get more information even here in 20 minutes. So as we get more information, there'll be more to analyze. There's, we shouldn't burn too much daylight spinning our wheels and getting worked up over very, very, at this point, limited information as to what all this actually means.
Yeah, right. Okay, sounds good. Actually, you know what? As you were talking, I just realized there's one other item I just wanted to show, but you know what? I'm going to hold off on that. I'm going to hold off on that till a future episode where we tackle the Jesuits again. All right. So one thing that has been, obviously I'm in Canada. There's been a lot of freakouts over the fact that, a few, 5-6 days ago, there was the announcement that the first wave of tariffs was going to be imposed onto Canada and Mexico unless certain things were done. So across, the entire information space, mainstream media, a lot of anti-Americanism. Why do the Americans want to hurt Canadians? And, Trump is just so bad and Canadians have just been very, very soft-minded on the issue of geopolitics, and a little bit too soft also on appreciating the role of the Privy Council, the deep state, which is the hand of the British Empire that's been active for over 2 centuries in the Canadian context. Again, through the instruments of things like the Jesuits and the Anglicans, which run very, very interconnected intelligence operations that manage a lot, that are tied to things like the Rhodes Trust, the Rhodes Scholarship Network, which has been misshaping so much of not just our political, economic, foreign policy, but cultural and educational narratives that we've been fed for generations. So there's been a baked-in anti-Americanism that Americans don't understand. They don't get this because they're like, oh yeah, Canadians, they look and sound so much like us. We're all like, we're all one family. No, or like Canadians, what they want to be it's America's hat. Like a lot of Americans have this kind of, jokey. It's a jokey idea.
Yeah. America's hat.
Yeah. And it's but the weaponization of the Canadian culture mentally against Americans that want to steal our water, that want to take us over. And there's been like this romanticization, which is mostly fake when you actually look into the story of like the battles between the US and British Canadian operations going back to 1812, where, there was a fight. There was a fight even, before the American Revolution had ended. There was already a fight in 1775 to take control of Quebec, of Canada, because it was understood to be a geopolitical beachhead. And, we talked about Lincoln as well, and Lincoln's murder being directed from Canada. So there's always been these intelligence operations. And so there's been, with the discussion of annexation of Greenland, of Canada, there's been a lot of like latent subconscious fear that's been brought to the surface, driving people nuts. So there's 2 enemy images that have been cooked up: this multi-generational anti-Americanism, and number 2, this anti-Chinese sentiment, which has also been customized for an American audience, but Canadians have their own CIA. In Canada, our CIA is called CSIS. But the creative writers have customized these fear-mongering narratives across mainstream and alternative media for a Canadian audience as well. Justin Trudeau is a CCP shill. The Chinese are behind all of our drug problems. They're like a lot of this. It's huge. It's a full spectrum. And the thing that they always avoid is the fact that Justin Trudeau is a member of the Queen's Privy Council and a puppet of this actual oligarchy that goes back to these hereditary families that are also members of the Knights of Malta, all of them, for millennia, that he, just like his father, this has nothing to do with communism versus capitalism. This goes back way deeper than that. Number 2, the actual drug problems that we face are completely controlled by the major banks of Wall Street, and especially the City of London. And in Canada, we only have 6 big banks. That's all we have. In the US, there's thousands of banks. There's big banks, but there's thousands of commercial local banks. We don't have that in Canada. They never permitted that. There's only 5 or 6 Canadian banks that are all that there. Yeah, that's all there is.
Huh.
Yeah, you got a few credit unions in British Columbia and one in Quebec, credit unions, but a few, but not even very many. But only 5 or 6, I'd say 5 Canadian banks. In Australia, there's only 4. So the Commonwealth likes that command and control quality of the banking system, because that's the core part of geopolitical warfare, is control over finance. So here's one thing that I found interesting is that and I've got this book called Doping, which years ago when I read this, it was published in 1979 by EIR, and it goes through the Canadian CIBC, especially Scotiabank, Toronto Dominion Bank as being the key drug money laundering banks that also finances terrorism. And nobody talks about that. So there's a few items here that just came up since the threats for tariffs onto Canada was stopped because Canada actually started doing something that was requested by Trump, which is actually crack down on your drug problem. Like actually do something about the border, do something about the Mexican drug gangs, declare these Mexican drug gangs, which are very active and protected by intelligence agencies in Canada, put them on the terrorist list. Just do that, right? And then you can start acting in a way that you couldn't if they were not on the terrorist list. So that's begun to happen. Really, and it's quite interesting that that's happened. And now we have, just a few months ago, one of the biggest drug bust in Canadian history happened in British Columbia. This is November 20th, 2024, when there was already a discussion about finally doing something about this. Again, it's not the Chinese, even though every Canadian every day is being blasted by the Chinese are out to control our fentanyl and destroy our economy and our people. Some Sinaloa drug cartel in British Columbia, biggest drug bust in history. Now, nobody actually went to jail. 2 people got arrested. They immediately got out on bail. Huge arms cache. This massive house had barbed wire fencing around it in a suburb neighborhood for years. Like, what the? So anyway, that actually just happened. Again, not Chinese. Then we had October 2024. Toronto Dominion, one of the third biggest bank, was fined $3 billion in the biggest money laundering settlement. So they'd been laundering hundreds of billions of dollars of drug money for years and years and years. Finally, they actually were forced to do something about it. So this is, again, not Chinese bank. This is Toronto Dominion Bank. And again, it kind of disappeared from the headlines pretty quickly. It's coming back in a little bit now because of Trump's forcing us to actually talk about this. But this is not new, because even going back to 2012, this is a CBC news coverage from HSBC that had to pay $2 billion to settle a giant money laundering case. Again, for decades, HSBC, which is a big player in this thing, the Dope Incorporated book, has been used to, again, launder drug money, and that goes into the FARC guerrillas in Colombia and the Sinaloa. All of the different drug cartels in Latin America and also the Middle East have been funneling their money by design by HSBC, which was caught. Senator Carl Levin ran the hearings, had a report. People could still read it, although there's an effort to scrub it in 2012, and they were forced to actually pay a huge fine, and they had a spotlight put on them. Now, they didn't actually stop what they were doing. And there's been enough reports in 2017 onward showcasing that HSBC continued to launder the money. But it was such bad publicity that their HSBC, because it's a London-based bank, the Hong Shang Bank of Commerce. People are like, oh yeah, Hong Kong, Shanghai,
the Chinese, yeah,
the Chinese are doing it. It's proof. It's like, no, it's a London-based bank that was created to oversee the Opium Wars in 1865 to destroy China. And it's still based there in London. And although they have huge operations and control 1/3 of the money supply in Hong Kong, even though the British technically gave back Hong Kong in 1997, they still control a huge amount of the Hong Kong money supply, which showcases what are the deep state operatives that are trying to destroy China still today, as they were in 1865, that are still there, that China has not yet been able to crack down on. Important point. But who bought HSBC's Canadian? Because a big part of during the Cold War of the drugs that were coming into the U.S. were being managed by the mafia, which was also part of the CIA operation. Like the mafia from the top was controlled by the CIA. Operation Gladio was a big part of that. That was like the Fascist International from 1946 all the way up until the present. So they were doing a lot of the dirty work, getting the drugs into the different communities. They had their jurisdictions, but the actual infrastructure to make it happen came in through the Silver Triangle from Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, that whole Silver Triangle area. Also, that was brought in from Afghanistan at a certain point in Pakistan, in through the Pacific, through operations that were sent into Canada, into Vancouver. And Vancouver became the hub to disperse it into North America more broadly, effectively the U.S. especially. And so HSBC's operations that began in North America in 1977 were designed to take control of that. Now, Bank of Canada, what year is this? This is 2024. just completed its acquisition of the London HSBC banking operations that controlled also a big controlling stake in Air Canada, which anybody goes to Air Canada, which is the biggest airline, the only real airline there is in Canada in a significant way, that has all of the infrastructure to have planes moving back and forth from Asia into North America. It's Air Canada. They bought it all up. So RBC now owns it. The Royal Bank of Canada, it's the biggest or second biggest Canadian bank, purchased that up. Now, RBC, if you go back to 2012, the Coutts Bank, which is the official bank of the royal family, multi-generational, multi-centennial bank, they were also fined for serious money laundering operations that they were facilitating for decades. This is 2012 again, the same year that Carl Levin was overseeing the crackdown on HSBC. As soon as they were found guilty and they had to pay their fine, immediately who comes in to take control of all of their British Cayman Island offshore banking operations? Royal Bank buys. I put up the wrong one. Basically, the answer was RBC. RBC, Royal Bank of Canada, buys Banque Coutts, all of their Caribbean operations and Canadian operations. So this is what is finally, it seems like there's a spotlight being put increasingly on this. We see also in Mexico, there's the forcing of action to be taken now against this thing that has been groomed and supported and grown, kind of like ISIS and Al-Qaeda has in the Middle East, as proxies for this Anglo-Venetian Zionist, oligarchical nasty thing. These are all proxy groups that are created by intelligence agencies. Same thing for the drug cartels in Latin America. And I'm hoping that we're finally going to get a serious action finally being taken. And that has to also involve a crackdown, as we're beginning to see with TD Bank, and an exposure of the major banking operations of Wall Street and London that have been working together to make this happen. And there's a picture too in Colombia of the president of the New York Stock Exchange. I should have pulled it up. Who went down to Colombia to one of these FARC guerrilla narco-terrorist camps and embraced Raul Reyes, the second in command of the FARCs, in 1999, because they're managing. He's the money manager of all of the FARC, narco-terror money laundering. These are people responsible for mass enslavement of Colombian peasants, kidnappings, murder galore, murder of politicians trying to do something. So, this is like, if we deal with the Wall Street issue, if we break up these Wall Street banks, because they're bankrupt. And I'm hoping that Trump can actually, carry out this fight here this time around and seriously break them up and clean out the unpayable derivatives and debt holdings and other things that are part of the time bomb that's designed to blow up and take down our economy and kill our people. If we can separate that time bomb from the clean part of the banking system that sustains life, then we can actually, I think, do something about how they've been supporting massive drug cartels. And I think China would be happy about that. China would not be unhappy that we're finally doing that. So, I just wanted to share those considerations a little bit because they're really big. And the other thing too was the Sovereign Wealth Fund. I don't know if we've got 5 more minutes. I don't know if there's anything that you...
I can kind of address that with everything you just said. The Sovereign Wealth Fund is huge. The fact that we're going to mimic what Saudi Arabia has and many other countries have. All the time I've spent digging into Saudi Arabia, I have long wondered why we don't have something like that already. Like colleges and universities have endowment funds, which is basically they take donation money that people give them and then they put it into a fund just like this that spits out a derivative, and they use that a dividend, and they use that dividend for cash flow to keep their cash flow consistent. So it makes all the sense in the world that a government could do that to finance its operations. It's a brilliant play, and I'm so happy to see it. I think that does go hand in hand with the idea of abolishing taxation, the tariffs, taking down which is a huge money laundering theft operation. The banks as well. When you look at central banking, the IRS and the Federal Reserve are all one and the same, deeply tied. And then when you look at some of these banks that you just listed, they have tangible connections or direct connections to the Federal Reserve and just that entire central banking system. And a lot of the issues that we are facing and problems that we're dealing with in the world right now, that because geopolitics, I think, is at this point deeply infused in domestic politics because of the transnational nature of this cartel that we're up against. What facilitates their operations are these banks, the banks that allow them to launder money, the banks that launder money for them, the banks that are complicit in the human trafficking, the drug trafficking, financing terrorism, all of this stuff. It only happens because you have private entities that are making money off of it, number one, but also probably have a vested interest in the operations themselves, whether it's a ideological interest or it's a financial compensation interest. Maybe they're getting something out of it, when there's regime change. There are reasons that these cartels exist. There are reasons, and when I say cartels, I mean these banking cartels. There are reasons that these terrorist cartels exist, and they're as massive as they are, and they're as well financed as they are, and they have tanks and serious military equipment. Like, how do they afford that stuff? Well, they're getting funding from the U.S. government, among other places. But a lot of the financing with the drug trafficking and human trafficking is being facilitated by the banks. The banks are a huge problem, and then the normie American understands how big of an issue banking is. The banks are, because of what happened in 2008 with like you talk about them just continuing to doing the money laundering. Well, in 2008, that whole subprime mortgage scam that happened, they were like, okay, we're never going to do that again. Give us all your money, bail us out. Yeah. And they ended up just taking the money, giving themselves huge bonuses, and they're right back to doing the subprime stuff all over again. And we're probably in another bubble that's going to pop at some point. I mean, Trump's mentioned that before. Yeah,
definitely. No, and just for people who may be a little bit confused about how the sovereign wealth fund can work and should work, just look at, again, Denmark has one, Saudi Arabia has one, and it works kind of like it's an instrument of defense, and it allows for a nation, if this works, this only works if you actually have like a good leadership. If you don't, it could be anything that has power, something that can do damage. But in the context of what Trump is actually saying, it could work kind of like a national bank a little bit, because he even said this is going to be designed to invest in national development projects such as highways, airports, manufacturing hubs, and medical research, and it will help pay down the national debt. It will be funded with income collected from new tariffs. That's exactly right. That would be, you have equity, you create the basis now of issuing loans, issuing credit towards building things that the nation objectively needs for the general welfare and the individual liberties of each person to be met, which is, we all need food, we all need water, we all need good jobs. So until you can actually train the private Wall Street bankers to start behaving like actual patriots, which hasn't happened in a long time, there's going to be a required period of like reconditioning behavior towards thinking about banking and economics from the standpoint of real wealth creation instead of just extraction and gambling, which has like really corrupted us now for a couple of generations. That's a really good gateway to begin to do that. And the tariff revenues are a really great way to start just injecting capital on top of other things that you're going to be getting as you start cutting the budget from very expensive, wasteful spending. And maybe there's going to be some, as you pointed out, I think in one of your briefs, as Saudi Arabia was able to crack down on their deep state in 2017, there was a lot of reacquisition of ill-begotten gains that could then be put to good use, building things instead of just stealing. So we'll see if something similar, analogous, could happen on that front as well. Yep. So we're at the 1 hour mark here. Shall I play? I guess I'll play the My Pillow ad, the second ad for the day, and then you can see if there's any questions or thoughts people would like to share from the audience.
Yeah, go ahead and play that.
All right, here we go.
I'm excited to announce that we're having our first ever mega sale on overstock clearance and brand new products. For example, save over 50% on this season's flannel sheets. Queen size only $59.98. Kings only $69.98. They sell out fast every year, so order now. Save 20% on our brand new My Crosses. They're designed in the likeness of the one I've worn every day for over 20 years. They come in men's and women's, and they're made right here in the USA. Get our 2025 6-piece My Towel sets for only $29.98. Our initial quantities are extremely low, so get them now before they go. And our best-selling standard My Pillows, just $14.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use this promo code to take advantage of our first ever mega sale. But wait, remember that $75 free shipping rule? Well, that ship is sailed because right now, every order ships absolutely free.
All right.
Yes. Thank you, Mike Lindell. All right, yeah, we have a few rants and then a few boosts, and then we'll get out of here. Patriot Jewel, $1. Another group of people were misled by tainted history to believe that the Templars were just good people spreading Christianity. I someone who, or I think she means I know someone who was one, and he wears a tat thinking it was good ops. Yes. Yes, that's absolutely true. And that's psychological warfare. Unfortunately. So that's the nature of the beast.
Yep.
808 France, $5 challenge, show tour support. Show our support. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Crane off 59, $5 challenge accepted. Crane, appreciate you, brother. Thank you all so much for your generosity. We have a few boosts. Let me hit these real quick. Pig 4801, $50. Love this show. I learned so much. One question: how can Trump broker a lasting deal with Israel and Palestine when the factions inside Israel are not on the same page? Want to just start up again, regardless of any deal. Same Russia and Ukraine. That's a really, really good question. I think we're starting to see that unfold right now, and I think it's going to be a process. I don't think it's something that's going to be resolved with just one moment or one act. So we'll just have to stand by and continue to analyze it.
Yeah, and I think with the Ukraine thing, we're seeing it take a little bit more believable form or more concrete form, in the sense that when you cut USAID off or shut down USAID, we see the basic functions of the Kiev puppet regime kind of shut down. 90% of their media and propaganda financing comes from USAID. Without that, they just cannot carry out their general the type of brainwashing and propaganda operations that are needed to just keep this fire going. It can't be done if you cut off the supplies that are supporting weapons purchases, other things. There's not much you can do. You just stop pouring the fuel on the fire, and you'll see the fire peter out. That's part of it. There's
I think that's to a large extent true. And then you can have other efforts that can help detangle it. So. Sylvia in California, $25. Gordon and Matt, you guys are great. Love your show. I always learn new things. Your knowledge of history helps put current events in context and helps the listener to understand history as it's being made. Consider 2 shows a week. That is very generous. Thank you so much, Sylvia. And
thanks.
We will think about that for sure. Arlene, $20. Ghost, your knowledge of the Mideast conflict is overwhelming. Thank you for presenting it in an understandable way. I look forward to all your shows you contribute to. Thanks again. Well, thank you, Arlene. Thank you all, everyone, for joining us today. We do have to have kind of a short show today. Just lots of stuff going on. But please hit the thumbs up, and we will see you next week.
All right. Take care.